Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, the location for Mark Evans' third feature film. His future as a director depended on this film making it. It was not going to be an easy ride. His first film, House of America, set in South Wales, told the story of a dysfunctional family. His second, Resurrection Man, a violent tale set in the heart of the Northern Ireland sectarian troubles. Both enjoyed some critical success, but did not fare well at the box office. A large set is constructed on the outskirts of town in a disused leisure centre. An experimental horror film shot CCTV style on DV cameras using 5 unknown actors on a small budget, this film could never be described as conventional.
My Little Eye is about 5 20-somethings that are put in a house for 6 months in the vein of perhaps, a Big Brother or Survivor.
It's about 5 people that agree to go into like an isolation experiment for 6 months in this house in the middle of nowhere that they have no idea where they are. Their helicopter dropped in. They literally have no clue. Somewhere in the States.
I suddenly feel all on display.
5 people, for different reasons, apply and get chosen to go and live in a house which is on the internet 24 hours a day.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
Please.
They're in the house for 6 months living together, and provided none of them break, a very minimal number of set rules, they'll walk away with $1 million.
There's someone upstairs.
So they're in this house and things just start to go wrong.
No television, no radio, no email, no nothing, And what we're used to, a tribe of like 6 billion people, is reduced to a tribe of 5. And one person's reality, one person's paranoia can be so easily transferred to everybody else.
What's your problem? You're always picking on people. You're always picking on me.
When they all stay in that house, with no guidance, their sense of reality starts to get skewed. And they all start to sort of go into their own mind. And they have no way of locking themselves onto reality, and it starts to just blur and get more confused. And that's when everyone's paranoias and fears start to come to the surface.
When I first read it, I was in bed, my boyfriend wasn't staying with me, and I was like, my cat moved, and I was like,
Is someone out there?
When one person gets afraid, that fear transfers so easily to everybody else.
Somehow horror films belong in America, but there's a kind of creative, sort of artistic decision as well, which is to do with the fact that it's based on the idea of the house that may not exist, the house in the middle of nowhere. And if you want to look for the middle of nowhere, in my head anyway, you've got to go to somewhere like America. America is the land that owns the mythology of the conspiracy theory, the web, and big open spaces with a wooden house in the middle of it. And those are the 3 elements in this film.
The whole of the interior of this classic haunted house was custom built. Its 3 levels constructed in the same way as a conventional building. The realistic feeling this created allowed the actors to move around freely on the set, and meant that the cameras could be positioned in many different places.
Switching the frequencies and switching.
Although I think if you've got a sound to begin with. One of the inspirations for this film was coming here to Recce to try and find a location, and seeing on milk cartons the pictures of kids who've gone missing. We always think in the UK that somebody will find you. People always think that Richie Mannick's going to turn up. The really scary thing about America is you think you could go somewhere and you'd never get seen again. Okay, action. And so you could sign up with a website in a supermarket in Idaho, or like a flyer you saw in a supermarket in Idaho, and you'd send your interview in on tape and you meet some bloke in a heliport somewhere, they'd helicopter you to this woods somewhere, and you'd never be seen again. And that idea is somehow more plausible in America, the mythological America. So if you tighten a bit on that, Warren. Bit wider. I think the challenge of this film, from a directing point of view, is that it's kind of a bit of a contradiction, really, hybrid of two things, because you're sort of exploiting the whole phenomenon of reality TV, and reality websites. So you're trying to make something that feels like that, very naturalistic, and then you're also trying to make a horror film. It's an experiment that might be doomed to failure because there's sort of slight contradiction, because horror films have rules, certain rules, and reality TV have another set of rules, and they don't always match.
It is the movie, the digital, the aspect of watching us, and the reality is very now also, but it's not cheesy. It's not like a Survivor. It's not like Big Brother. It's really just the whole premise of the movie and the way that they're filming it gets you in there further and deeper and convinces the audience where they actually feel that they're living it too.
Cut, very good, excellent.
The movie could be really visually boring because you don't get to do any of those great sweeping, moving shots. You know, it's just security cams that sort of pan back and forth. But, you know, he's just come up with a very, very cool way of doing it. You could watch a movie where there's a robbery scene and someone gets shot and it's cut and there's blood and it squibs and exploding and it's really gruesome, but it's not that terrifying. But you watch a security camera shot, just a single shot of a clerk. A guy walks in, it's very simple, and he shoots him, and the guy falls down, and all you hear is the sounds and the breathing, and it's absolutely horrifying.
Filming on digital tape and not the usual 35mm film was a new experience for Mark, and one which he found very challenging.
In one sense, it's really liberating, because you need less light, so the lights are smaller, you can shoot quicker, you can shoot multi-camera. But there are disadvantages as well, because somehow it just seems more chaotic. You know, we've got to situations on this film where we've had 5 cameras and the producer had one camera up a crane and somebody else has been taking another shot, and it's almost got that kind of documentary feel to it sometimes, which is good and very exciting, but sometimes it means you're not quite sure what you shot or what you're doing, and it gets a bit confusing. So it's trying to make a horror film with one arm tied behind your back in a way. But digital has sort of brought back a sense of risk and experimentation into the film industry, which is getting quite expensive and quite staid, I think.
Mark felt that the film, for it to be a success in a naturalistic, believable way, needed unknown faces.
The thing that was really interesting and fascinating about the casting for me, over and above trying to find unknown youthful actors for the parts, was the idea that in this vast country that people will travel to New York or to LA to wait on tables, but with a very real hope that they will be selected, they will be picked out for a movie or for something, and that they will make it. And you're just very aware sometimes that it's a kind of lonely dream that they have. But this is the land that created that dream, and I've got really mixed feelings about it, really.
This was the first time Mark had worked in North America, a stark contrast to his first 2 films, which were set in Wales and Northern Ireland.
He's very passionate about what we're doing, and I found that he communicates in a lot of ways to the actors, but doesn't really dictate scenes as much as other directors I've worked with. And he tends to, he kind of gets a sense of you and then sort of trusts your instinct a lot. So a lot of times what he will do as he's directing is sort of pose questions for you, like, well, here you are in the scene, this is the context, and explain the scene or whatever. And say, what do you think you do? If you need help, I'll give you help. Like, you might go over here, you might look over here, you might have this kind of tone or whatever. But generally, he lets you sort of find your pace, and you sort of meet eye to eye on it.
He always says there's like horror movie lines that he always wants to get rid of. He's like, if you find a line that's a horror movie line, then we just cut it, you know, because if it's a line like, they're here, you know, it just doesn't work in reality, you know.
The kind of biggest challenge on this film and every film really is to find its tone, to find what it's going to be. And every film's got its challenge from that point of view, and when you're doing it, you're never quite sure whether you've got the level right. And more often than not, the note that you, or the thing that you ask most from an actor is less, rather than more. Actors will give you everything. So it's just trying to find a tone that's right for a film that's supposed to be naturalistic. And to be honest, I don't know if I found it, and I just think it's the riskiest element of this film, is trying to make a film that somehow has got the tone of naturalism, because film isn't natural. It is naturalistic, it's false. I've had a few wobblies on this about, ooh, is this... And it's just weird, because sometimes you think a scene sounds natural and sometimes you think it doesn't. And it's very hard to define what that is.
He cast us purposely because he knew that we were these characters. We could do this as fast as this has to be. And he just kind of comes and turns the knob, you know, up, turns it louder or softer.
So a lot of the times you feel like, okay, this is what I think, this is where I think I am in this scene, this is what I think I'm doing, and he lets you go with that. Which is probably a very difficult thing to do as a director. I think it must be very hard to yield to some kind of control.
At the end of the day, you've got a script and you've got a story, and if you're making a horror film, you've got certain things that have to happen to the characters. So you can never really liberate yourself from that fact that you're making a fiction, that you're making this thing which has to work a certain way. It's just trying to find that idea within the film. And I'm in the middle of filming. I don't know whether we found it or not, but that's the challenge. You never get away from the fact that film is always false, really. So it's just how well you tell the lie. So we'll see.
But is the success of the film important to the cast?
I think that's very important to me, because I wouldn't want to get involved with anything I didn't believe in, nor anything I was hoping wouldn't succeed. And so I hope that the vision succeeds.
I hope and feel like this could be big. You know, it could be really cool and culty, or it could be very commercial.
I'd be really psyched if it was super successful. I mean, I've been working a lot in New York, and this has just been a really great break for me, and you know, I have every intention of making this movie as successful as it can be. You know, I'm not here to put out a schlock movie.
I want to make a good movie. That's very important to me. I mean, that's paramount to me. To be in a film that when I watch it, I don't feel it's a good film is just crushing to me. I hate that. There's nothing I hate more.
In the middle of a film, you're not really thinking about its success. You're just thinking about, or you're not thinking about its commercial success or not. Especially as somebody who's never made a commercially successful film. There's a part of you, and it's sort of corrupting kind of idea really, at the end of the day. There's a part of you going, I hope this film's successful so that I can make another film. And what that really means is that it's box office, has got some sort of box office success. I think you have to confront that in yourself. You can't say, I'm going to make a film but I don't care whether it's successful or not. But, you know, your main job as a director is trying to make it work. And your main confusion as a director is whether it's working or not. So you just got to, you know, go with it and accept the fact on this film that it's made fairly cheaply, and it's, you know, with the producer's blessing, if you like, the backer's blessing, is an experimental film. Without a whiff of any kind of false modesty, I just don't know whether this film is working or not. And I've recognised in myself that and I don't know how other directors do it. I think it's pretty common. In the middle of a film, you don't really know. You just get completely confused about everything, whether you're doing it right, whether it works, and you're constantly watching rushes and trying to modify things and do it this way and do it that way. I just think you've got to stick to your original idea in some ways. You just got to stick to the feeling you have about when you started, because halfway through you don't know whether it's good or bad.
That's a wrap. Okay, that's a wrap, folks. Thanks for all the noise.
London, the summer of 2002. The filming is over, the editing is over, but the hard part, selling the film, has only just begun.
I think when we left Halifax, we didn't know what we had, to be honest with you. It had been such an arduous shoot, and I was so tired and I was so pleased to get out of there. It had been long and intense, and I couldn't wait to see it put together. I thought we'd got some really interesting stuff. I just didn't, one, I didn't know whether it was scary, and two, I didn't know whether we could actually make a film out of it.
When John and I talked about the film before shooting it, we said that it should be like a thrash metal single. It should be short, effective and nasty. The editor put a rough cut together and it was 4 hours long.
Hey, check it out.
4 hours to 90 minutes is a very long journey.
I think we're being watched.
The thing is that the film went through a bit of a hard time and people thought it wasn't working for a very long time. Your worst enemy is losing confidence in the film you're trying to make. Is it scary? Do you know who the killer is? All that stuff.
This will be of interest to some of you.
Working title decided that what we should do is test it. I remember thinking it's a long way from a small cutting room in Soho to like an audience you don't know in Santa Monica or LA or wherever we're going to test it.
So we flew out to the States. We're due to test the film on September the 11th.
9/11, the 9/11, last year when it all happened.
You guys definitely waste food.
I miss fresh fruit.
The upshot of it was that we got the worst test results in the world.
We were testing it to find out what we should do to the film, not testing it to find out what the audience thought of a completed film. But the studio, Universal, were in the throes of post 9/11 anyway, and at that point word got out that the film had tested badly, so basically they walked away from the film.
There was a point when we were told the film was going to go straight to video and that nobody was going to release it. And that was probably the lowest point.
Matt. Oh, Jesus.
I'm sorry.
Danny! There's someone upstairs.
I never actually told Mark at the time that they'd said it was going to go straight to video because it didn't seem any point in sort of going, let's all be depressed together. And for a period of about 3 weeks, I thought it was going to video.
I was very conscious of the possibility of, just by a series of events and misjudgments and apathy by certain people, that the film would suddenly just get discarded, and that was a very tricky place to be. So part of the energy that we had in terms of sticking up for our film and turning the thing around was belief in the film that we'd made, but a part of it was actually a practical one of thinking, listen, we don't want to be these people who just made this film and went straight to video, you know.
The producers tried to generate interest from various distribution companies, and having knocked on the door of Momentum, found a company that had belief in the power and the quality of the film.
We got the opportunity to see the film, and we all were absolutely terrified. And when you have such a strong reaction like that, you know there's something in it.
The film premieres in 2 film festivals and in Edinburgh got extra publicity after an incident occurred during the viewing.
One of the women in the screening actually had a bit of a panic attack, which in itself generated, because I mean it is a stupendously scary film, and actually we couldn't have hoped for more than that, because that actually hit. People were talking about that, it hit Screen International, and then it really sort of built from there. But we'd always planned that Edinburgh, particularly for the UK, was going to launch the film.
Next stop, Canada.
Then we took it to Toronto.
What happened in Toronto was part of a thing called Midnight Madness.
The first screening in Toronto was at midnight.
John and I went over and we thought, this is never going to fill. Midnight, 900 people, it's not going to happen. And actually, we got to the cinema and there were 700 people queuing around the block to get in. And most of them had Evil Ted t-shirts or carried skateboards. We thought, well, this is like much more of a test for its real audience.
It played fantastically well. It was the best screening I've been in to date. There was a Q&A afterwards at 2:30 in the morning, and 600 people stayed for an hour to ask questions and talk about it. And that was the first inkling that like we might be okay.
And it was like realising for the first time that the film had, whatever else the general public thought about it, it had reached its audience, or was capable of reaching its audience, and it had an audience that understood it, and that we'd passed the genre test.
So by now the film was generating its own momentum.
The other thing that gave us faith in the fact that we made a film that the horror audience would respect was Ain't It Cool, the website. Because Ain't It Cool started to find out about the film, and they started writing to each other about the film. We thought, well, great, we've at least entered that realm where horror fans are kind of discussing and arguing and debating the merits and strengths and weaknesses of the film, you know, and that, you know, then you exist, the film exists, and your job done to a certain extent.
Films without any stars that cost £2 million don't have lots of press and advertising money spent on them. So you've got to generate a conversation. And the great thing about this film, and the reason the crits were really important, was we needed them to pick it up and start having a conversation about it.
What the film managed to do is it sort of reached, it was in the ether in a way. It became, people were aware of this little budget film doing big things.
When I was talking to David Livingston, who is in charge of marketing at Universal, you know, he was saying, look, this only happens once or twice a year that, like, you know, the media pick up a film and say, oh, this is an event, you've got to talk about it, it's got a hook, and like you get that much press coverage. And fantastically that happened because you know, we would never have made the box office without it. So it was sort of vital.
Not only was the film getting noticed for its quality, Mark also found himself in the limelight. Articles appeared in all kinds of magazines, and his face even graced the cover of British cinema magazine Sight and Sound.
Yeah, when I saw him on the front of Sight and Sound, it made me laugh because he looked like it sort of given enough authenticity that we didn't feel. So we were laughing. Yeah, I saw it in the newsagents. I thought, oh God, if I didn't know the story behind that, I'd think that I'd believe the cover. But I sort of didn't believe it, or that that the film had become respectable, or that he'd become respectable, or that he could take such a good picture. But there again, he was standing next to Mike Leigh, so he's bound to look pretty good. But it was very funny.
If I'm totally honest, the picture on the cover of Sight and Sound helped me personally because I never felt really part of the British film industry at any point. And I also felt that I had a bit of a rough ride from that magazine in particular, but a certain intelligentsia in the film industry in terms of the way that my other films have been reviewed. So I enjoyed being on the cover of Sight and Sound, not so much from the point of view of vanity, but from the point of view of revenge, because I felt that I'd been accepted by a magazine that hadn't treated me very well in the past.
This isn't about your past. They just want you to think that. They just want you to think that.
That's why they picked me?
At first light, we head out together, okay? Okay? And they can fuck their money.
This time, even the critics were on his side.
Yeah, you know, you are scared of the critics because they're very helpful to you. They give you a good review in terms of helping the public perception of the film. And also, it kind of does hurt, obviously. I mean, a good review kind of... But, you know, the best attitude you can adopt is not to really believe good press or bad press, really, because you're never as good as a good review and you're never as bad as a bad review. So on this one, because we were struggling a bit with the film and the profile of the film, I wanted... The thing I wanted most was the critics to help us make the film survive, not... That was the thing I was most concerned about, more than what they might say about me or my personal feelings. And that's a good place to be in a way, because you just deal with it as a practical problem.
Hey, Psycho!
Don't be a fucking prick, Rex!
Psycho killer!
Rex.
Come on in! It's nice in here. We got food, we got liquor, we got women.
Stop!
One in particular you might be interested in. Come on in! Hey, there actually is somebody out there.
There is someone there. Shit, he's heading this way. It's cold out there. Maybe you recognize or something. I'm gonna come up. Emma, come on. Dude, open the door if you're 100% certain it's nothing, okay?
There was a point in this film that we really thought they were going to just chuck it in a bin. For me, as my third feature, I think if this film had gone straight to video, I don't think I'd have made another film. I think that's the way the industry works. So as well as believing in our work, the other incentive for trying to get the thing out there and seen and to get some respect for it was actually, we had, you know, particularly from my point of view, I wanted the film to have a life, because if a film doesn't have a life, then you don't have a future as a director really, because actually you made the film that went straight to video.
It's always easy to underestimate people who are even-tempered and, you know, sort of, who aren't particularly egocentric. I think it's really easy to assume that they're maybe not as talented, but I think he's hugely, hugely talented. Yeah, and I think he's certainly, you know, in a handful of one of the most exciting directors working in the UK. And certainly if I had to pick a director to work with, yeah, he'd definitely be top of the list. So it was really positive. The switch around between people saying this doesn't work to this works was so fast. It was very strange to go from, you know, this is straight to video to, oh, you're on the front of Sight and Sound as one of the scariest horror films of 2002. And I was really, really pleased for him because he deserved it and he should be there. Yeah, he should have been there years ago.
Mark amazingly did the most incredible amount of work supporting the film regionally, and all in all it was a brilliant success, given that the film really had no cast, no real budget. It was shot on DV and it had a sort of reality mix to it. All elements which could have been big hurdles, we sort of turned into the absolute positive, which is it all of those things made it a very, very scary film.
When you're somebody in my position, it basically, you're trying to get films made and you go for films that interest you, and you can only ever do anything even partially successful that you're interested in, or kind of, it gives you the stamina to go through the whole process of developing it, shooting it, editing it and fighting for it. That requires it to be something that you're interested in, and I'm sort of interested in genre, I'm interested in having a crack at something new, and I was interested in the technical problems of this film. So even though in some ways it wasn't a sort of safe choice, I basically, I suppose, fundamentally had enough faith in myself that I could pull it off.
Ever since the test results, I've been waiting for somebody to tell us that it's not going to work and it's pants. And it was all the way up until the first day of release, yeah, I've not believed it was going to work. It just gets ingrained in with you that the bad news is coming, and it hasn't. In UK terms, it's done fantastically well for a digital film that's an 18 certificate, and horror doesn't really have a home in the UK. Traditionally, it's never made any money, so these are sort of fantastic results.
I'd say the overall feeling I got at the end of the journey of My Little Lie, which is almost finished now, is relief. Actually, you don't make one film, you make 3 films. It's the film you write, the film you shoot, and the film you cut. And I think that somewhere between the film we shot and the film we cut, we almost lost faith in the film we were trying to make. And it is a relief to come to the end of it and think, oh, actually, we weren't completely mad to try and make the film that way, or to try and stick to our guns. Because what happens is when people tell you your film's not working or your film's not going to be successful, you start losing confidence in probably what's best about it, and that is the original idea. And I'm really glad we stuck to our guns, really.
The film covered its costs after its British cinema release. Its release in other territories is yet to happen. Mark is currently working on his 4th film.